It's interesting, John, as a financial professional starts to think about positioning themselves as really a thought leader in the industry as opposed to just an advisor, and how that transformation happens in the eyes of their clients. And there are so many ways to do it, but it really takes a commitment of time, obviously, of resources and a strategy, and not just one and done. And I think that there's oftentimes just so much process behind it that can be very overwhelming for financial professionals. And those are conversations that I'm having every day. I don't know if those are discussions that you're having as well with financial professionals.
Well, it's funny, Julie. I don't think about it that much. I mean, I've never applied for the job as a thought leader. I don't think you did either, but essentially, we provide a lot of it for Hartford Funds, even through a podcast like what we're doing today. But let me just tell you about my experience in quote unquote thought leadership. Very early in my career, the PR folks at Hartford thought it would be a good idea if I went on some of the financial television shows up in New York, the CNBC, MSNBC, all the market kind of shows that go on during the day, and share some outlooks on longevity, aging, all this kind of stuff. Well, it's funny, when I came back from doing those little interviews, you would have thought from the colleagues around me that something in me changed, because everybody all of a sudden was kind of like, hey, John, what are your thoughts on this? And what do you think about that? I was still the same person, but now being cast in the mold of a thought leader, if you will. People kind of had different level discussions with you. And I think in our podcast today with Kevin Nichols, that's what we're talking about. We're not, there's not necessarily a recipe. What we need to identify are things that are really important to us as financial professionals that we think more clients need to hear about, and then begin to develop a brand about creating good ideas and sharing those through whatever medium we choose.
I think it's a really exciting opportunity for financial professionals to share that information. And I love how Kevin even said, sharing stories and conversations confidentially, of course, that you're potentially having with other clients that you think could help. I just think it's such a great opportunity for financial professionals to position themselves as sharing that information.
Isn't it great when you run into someone out there on the road who comes up to you, you've never met them before, and they say to you, hey, John, or hey, Julie, I love the podcast episode you all did on XYZ. I mean, it's awesome. It's like you're there when you're not even there. And that's really what we're talking about today, is how to leverage the knowledge that you as a financial professional have to create kind of a persona and someone that even people you don't even know yet will look to for your opinions and your thoughts on given topic areas. And so that's why I'm so excited to hear from Kevin Nichols today from Oxley. Kevin, this is their business, right? They help people not only think about thought leadership, but actually take the steps to put it into action. So I think our audience is really going to enjoy the conversation we have with Kevin Nichols.
Absolutely. Kevin is the COO at Oxley and the author of the indispensable LinkedIn Sales Guide for Financial Advisors. He's been a social media columnist for wealthmanagement.com for over 10 years, and he's also the co-host of the popular podcast, The Stephen and Kevin Show.
And so, Julie, let's share with everybody what Kevin had to share with us about moving from being just a financial professional to being a thought leader. Hi, I'm John.
And I'm Julie.
We're the hosts of the Hartford Funds Human-Centric Investing Podcast.
Every other week, we're talking with inspiring thought leaders to hear their best ideas for how you can transform your relationships with your clients.
Let's go.
Hello, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here today with us on the Human-Centric Investing Podcast.
I'm happy to be here, Julie.
So, Kevin, on today's podcast, we really wanted to talk to you about this transition that many advisors experience, where they go from being kind of known as the financial professional or financial advisor to really an industry thought leader. And it's kind of funny because when I think about thought leadership, remember, what was it, about 10 years ago that the electronic publishing business started up, where maybe it's longer ago, where I could put my name on the title of like any book and it made me seem like I was something I'm not. We're not talking about that basic step of
Right.
thought leadership, but I want to hear from you because I know you consult with advisors and teams all across the industry. What does thought leadership mean to you, and what value is there in it for the financial professional?
Yeah, I think that it's something that obviously where everything is headed is that you want to be present more and start building your expertise online through good content. And thought leadership in itself is sharing your own thoughts. And so when you're talking about putting your name on like a book, which I get it, I remember working with an advisor years ago who had this like shock and awe package. And I'm like, what is this? Oh, well, it's like, well, it's me on a book cover and me on this. And I send it to people in advance. And I was like, well, prospects and clients, they're not naive, right? They're not dumb people,
Right.
right? And they can tell like if it's your own thoughts and it's something that you put your heart and soul into versus something you didn't. Um, the idea here behind thought leadership is that we're just kind of fighting for attention online, right? We're all trying to do that. We're all trying to get a piece of this, right? This scroll that we're all stuck in. And I want to be kind of in the palm of your hand through good content. And I want to do that spaced repetition over time to a point, where when you have a need where you think, gosh, Kevin at Oxley has given me a lot of good stuff. I should reach out to them. Right. And it is playing a little bit of a long game, but I think it's a game worth playing for most advisors, and the advisors that we've worked with who've taken the time and energy to build that thought leadership. It really changes the whole sales process for them.
It's interesting. I think this starts at mindset and sort of value proposition. Obviously, so many financial professionals have, their value proposition through the years has either been on the investment side or the wealth planning side. And if you think about that, all of a sudden sort of putting themselves out there as a thought leader, that's sort of a whole new value proposition. Will you talk us through kind of that mindset shift and maybe why you think financial professionals should consider that as sort of a new arrow in the quiver as we think about, the changing landscape and value add as it pertains to what clients want and expect of their financial professional going forward?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the mindset shift. How does that happen? Because for some, it's a little bit of a struggle. You- I'd say
Yes,
the
it
first
is.
I'd say the first thing is like getting comfortable with the spotlight, like knowing that if I'm going to build thought leadership, I'm going to have to get comfortable sometimes, like being on camera, doing a podcast, right? And practicing some of those things. It could be even being on graphics or we've talked about before with websites and having custom photography and videography, getting comfortable with the spotlight, right? That's like the best way that I can put it. And that takes a little bit of a mindset shift at times. I remember working with an advisor who was in a video program with us, and the guy was a natural on video. I mean, his cadence, his delivery, I was impressed by it. A couple months in, he calls me up and he was like, "Kevin, I think I'm going to cancel the program. I don't want to do any more video content." And I was like, "Why?" And he just started kind of rambling, wouldn't give me a clear response. And after kind of peeling back some layers, it was revealed that he was out the other night with some friends of his from a former firm that he was out at, and they were kind of giving him a hard time and joking with him about his videos he was putting out. Well, they weren't allowed to do video content, and he was, and he was insecure about it, right? So there was some like self
Interesting.
consciousness that comes with putting yourself out there. What if someone says something to me about it? What if someone makes a negative comment? What if all that stuff? And I I don't know if there's an easy answer to it, Julie, than other than like get over it. Like this is how the world works now, and that your consumers are going online to find an information for whatever they're looking for. They're doing a lot of due diligence ahead of time, and you want to be one of those options. So it's going to take that for some. For others, it's not. For some advisors, it's like, oh my gosh, I've been begging to do this. Like I'm so excited to do this. An advisor I worked with used to have a radio show, right? And him getting into podcasting was like this is amazing. This is the new radio, right? So to me, that's part of it. Now that's the mindset part, and my answer, which is probably not the best answer, is just like get over it, right? Like people are going to judge you. Like that's going to happen, but you're going to be the one who builds influence and takes advantage of that right now, because eventually, I mean, it's just the market's just becoming more and more saturated. Like, let's be obvious here. Like, there's a million podcasts, right? There's a million YouTube channels, but can you niche down? Like, for example, for us talking about thought leadership, there's a million podcasts out there. Thought leadership for financial professionals, right? Like, now I'm creating something that my audience is going to really value and like listening to more than a generic video on building thought leadership overall.
Right.
The value component. I have research on this, so I have it right here in front of me. And sorry, I don't have these stats memorized, but this is Affluent Investor Research on what's the impact of an advisor being an author, a podcaster, or a video personality. So what's the impact of that? How did the affluent see it? Basically, the top answers here for the most of the demographic as a whole, and it was minimum of 500,000 investable, was it encourages me to actively seek their opinions. It increases my confidence in their abilities. And then this one, which to me I think is huge, is it inspires me to refer them to others more. And that one to me is one that we don't talk about enough.
And Kevin, I think it's important. You talked about the advisor, potential advisor, who's not comfortable in that light. I think thinking about some of those things that you just shared. By the way, I'll point out that the friends that were kind of giving them a hard time, at least they watched the videos, right? So they went in and found them.
Such a good point there, right? They saw it. They saw it. He was grabbing some attention. You know what? There's plenty of other people who watch those videos that he doesn't even know about, right?
And this is what I find is that, again, thinking about conversations I often have with my friend Joe Coughlin up at MIT, he believes the new value of financial advisors to their clients is this simple statement: tell me something I didn't know. Right? Because so many consumers now think we know so much about everything and we can learn anything on social media. Having somebody be able to say, I know you were told this, but I'm here to tell you that, right? Somebody to challenge our thinking, make us think through the processes. I think that's really where we want to get in thought leadership, where somebody actually cares about what I have to say. But as I think about that, Kevin, I think another objection might be, when we think about all these media outlets now, whether it's podcasting, whether it's video, whether it's whatever, and we just use this kind of broad term thought leadership, some financial professionals, I think, are a little bit worried about how divided the country is, how divided their client book would be. How do you know what topics are in scope and what topics you want to stay away from? By the way, from a political standpoint, I've seen advisors on both ends of the political spectrum. Some say, this is the client that I market to. Others say, this is the client I market to. So some might invite it, but how do you actually think about the right conversations to be leading thought on, if you will?
Yeah. Now, when it comes to being, on the political side of it, unless your clients are one way or the other, like I always tell advisors, like, let's be a political atheist in that regard. Like, let's try and not like go down those paths. Now, what you talk about conversations that you're having already. Like, and this is why the ideation process doesn't have to be overly complex. But right now, let's say you're having reviews with clients, what are you talking about primarily? What are the conversations that you're having? What's a story that you could share anonymously, of course, about a conversation you just had with an 80-year-old widow, right? Like, because there's someone else out there who could relate to it. Also, and I forget what was the value proposition you mentioned from the MIT person? Tell me something I don't know.
Tell me something. Tell me something I didn't know. Yeah,
I did it. Tell me something I didn't know.
Didn't know.
I love that, by the way. I think that's great, because what I want you to do is start giving away some of your best advice, like just some of your best stuff. I was talking to an advisor the other day who was saying, well, if I give away my best content, they don't need me. And I was like, well, if you don't give away your best content, they're never going to see you. And he was like, well, really? And I was like, yeah, because if you're not going to give that advice away or that tip away, someone else is. And that person is the one who's building the influence. That's the person who's actually building the authority and is going to start, really, when you think about marketing, you think about push versus pull. What we're doing with thought leadership is we're moving away from push strategies of whether it be old school cold calling or mass seminars or, those types of things, mass mailings. And we're trying to be magnetic. And in order to do that, we got to give away some of our very, very best stuff. And the reality is if that person takes some of your best content and implements it themselves, I would argue that they probably weren't going to hire you in the first place anyway. They're more of a DIYer. We did research on this at Oxley a while back, and we asked a group of DIY investors what would cause you to hire a financial professional, and the number one thing was I became too ill to do it myself. They're probably not going to hire you in the first place. I don't think you're going to convince them otherwise. So give away your best stuff. Tell them something they didn't already know. I hope that was it. That was a phrase, right?
It was, yeah. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. All right, good.
Kevin, don't you think that clients are also on the email distribution list of another financial professional somehow that they don't have a penny with? And I always say when I'm coaching advisors that chances are your clients are getting a drip from some other advisor that they don't have a penny with, that they somehow got on a list with. Maybe it's an interesting educational article. Maybe it's a summer tip from a dermatologist, right? It's just these drips. And all of a sudden, if you're not doing that and they have their $3 million with you, yet this advisor that they have $0 with sends them these monthly, really interesting articles and video clips, all of a sudden, it just over time starts to feel like, well, gosh, I don't have a penny with this advisor, but they've really brought me a lot of value. And it starts to create that questioning moment. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's just always been something that I've thought about.
I've never thought of it that way because I guess I'm on so many advisor newsletters because we run that for advisors. So I have so many, but I bet you're right. Like you're 100% right. They're on someone else's campaign or even they're seeing another advisor in their feed constantly. Right. And over time it shapes perceptions. It definitely does. We did some research on this, again, getting into newsletters, but we asked affluent investors what would be like the number one thing that would actually make you read an advisor's newsletter. And there was a top two. And number one was it had a written intro from the advisor themselves. So this is going beyond hey, here's an update on the markets and you just plug in whatever, right? The second one was it had interesting videos or content. So you're absolutely right. And it's shaping those perceptions. And over time, you want to be the one that they think of as they're really smart, provide me a lot of value. And why isn't my advisor doing this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Question on the consistency. I think that's the next conversation that I have with financial professionals is, okay, I think I want to do this. I'm going to start with a newsletter, say, or a blog. Gosh, I don't think I can do it every week. That comes really quickly. I think I could commit to monthly. What are your thoughts on frequency? Obviously, my thought always is once you've committed to a specific duration, you need to follow through, right? It's worse to say, I'm going to do this monthly newsletter and then do it for 4 months in a row. And then all of a sudden on the 5th month, not. So will you walk us through your thoughts on timing, consistency, follow through, and maybe even share some things that advisors are doing wrong, just to kind of put it all out there in the spirit of educating us?
Yeah. If we were working with a brand new advisor and they wanted to roll out a video series, first off, to back up even further, the idea of building thought leadership can feel overwhelming. Right. It's what does that mean? How much time do I have to allocate to this? I don't know if I have that time. Right. And this is all related to consistency. The first thing that I always tell them is we're going to build some sort of cornerstone series, just one cornerstone series. Now that could be a podcast like we're doing today. And maybe it's their podcast and it's branded. It's professionally done. To me, that'd be one, or a video series. That could be it. It could be written. Right. I just have I'm biased in the sense of I like being able to hear someone or see someone. I feel like that's a very humanizing. But when you think about even someone like um, back in the day, like, and if you followed him forever, and everyone knows Michael Kitces, right? The guy got
Mhm.
started, and he was starting off by writing these really in-depth articles because articles were just fantastic. They were super detailed. And that's what he did. So I'm not saying you can't do the article route as well. Now he has a podcast and whatever. Um, but you're going to pick one of those mediums, and we're going to create that cornerstone series. We're going to name it. We're going to brand it, and then we're going to commit to some level of consistency. If I were doing a podcast, I'm like, hey, twice a month at a minimum. If I could do it weekly, that'd be amazing. But also, I'm going to batch that creation. I mean, just to be clear, like we're doing that. Like that's what we're doing
Mhm.
right now, right? We're batching the creation. At Oxley, Fridays for us are content days. What we do on Fridays is like I block it off. I know we're creating content. We're creating short form videos. We're shooting an episode of our podcast, the Stephen and Kevin Show. We're like we batch the creation for sure, right? If I went to see Wheel of Fortune being filmed, like they don't just do one show and then they're done, right? Like it's like no, they're gonna pump out a bunch, right? So podcast frequency, I would say minimum like twice a month. If you could do more and you could stick to it, cool. Video, I'd feel about the same. Article, I think you could do one a month if you were doing that. If you're sending a newsletter, commit to one a month. I and then you can increase it from there. What happens naturally though is these advisors they get excited about it and they're like, "Oh, I want to quote," and this is what they'll come to us. "I want to quote for two videos a week." I'm like, "Okay, how many videos are you doing right now?" Zero. Okay.
Mhm.
Like let's back it up and let's come up with a realistic, because doing this stuff consistently is hard. Like it's just not
It
easy.
is.
Sometimes you don't feel like it. I mean, I don't know if you guys felt like recording a podcast today. I did, but you may not have. But that's the reality of it. Is there days where you're like, oh, I don't want to do it, but you got to do it, right? So pick a number that you can stick with and be fairly consistent with. We all fall off that train. And there's nothing worse than a podcast where I've seen it where an advisor does 5 episodes and they just don't do any more. And they haven't done another one in a year. It's like, what are you
Mhm.
doing, man? You started building an audience. People are starting to listen. They're waiting for the next episode, right? They're waiting for it on their phone. You got to give it to them.
That's why I think, Kevin, one of the things that Julie and I appreciate at Hartford Funds is we have an entire team of people. And even beyond our podcast team, we have a larger team that are suggesting potential guests to us. Because to me, that
Cool.
creative process, right? Having something interesting to say pretty much all the time is really, really challenging, right? Once you get your best
It is.
ideas out of the way, it's kind of like, what do I do? You're like a songwriter, right? You're only as good as your last hit. And so
It's
farming it
so
out,
true.
involving the team, I think is crucially important. But Kevin, aside from like those frequencies of people maybe getting ahead of themselves, Julie mentioned just a moment ago. Anything else stick out to you in terms of biggest mistakes that people make when they enter into this kind of thought leadership realm?
Yeah, when I think about some of the biggest mistakes, I do think about again. I start and I stop, and I again I'm not being consistent. I think the other is trying to do too much yourself, and I think you hinted at that.
Hmm.
There's certain aspects of it, like do you need to be editing video content? Like, is that the best use of your time as a financial professional? Probably not. But I do want you on video sharing your best ideas. But I don't think you need to mess with the editing. You could have someone on your team do that. You could outsource that. Distribution of the content is a whole nother animal in itself, right? I think
Hmm.
that's something too. So getting that right team in place, because if you're going to do it all yourself, that's a lot. Like that is a lot. But what I'm saying is, you can do it. You don't have to. You don't have to. You need an ally. You need a team that can help you with some of those things. But if you want to build thought leadership, it needs to be you. And I think another mistake I've seen is advisors who just used only canned content. And yeah, again, I know there's plenty of advisors listening who are like, "Oh yeah, I use content provided by my firm," and so great. That's okay. That's supplemental content. But you are not going to build thought leadership by posting articles from your firm. You're not. Like they're not going to look at you and give you the credit for those. And that's That's what you got to do. I mean, I said it, and I think it's so simple when it's like thought leadership is your own thoughts. And like, that's what you all have them. You're all, I mean, I talk to so many great advisors all the time. They have so many awesome ideas, and they're so
Agreed.
good talking to clients and great personalities. Share it with people. Here's one other, again, I'm rambling here, but here's another mistake: not being authentic enough. Not sharing some of those personal aspects of yourself, because I share with you I have a mini Bernedoodle, and you're like, gosh, I have a mini Bernedoodle, and now you feel like, oh, we have something in common, right? Or
Right.
that I'm into playing video games, like retro games, because when I grew up in the 80s, like that's what I did. Like those are things that humanize you, and we cannot forget that this is a people business, and people do business with people that they like, right? So, and again, I'm not saying coming in and being super polarizing with your ideas. I'm saying share personal tidbits about you that connect others to you. That'd be another mistake. It's just straight facts and figures and market updates, and that makes for you're not entertaining me at all. It bores the audience.
Mhm.
That all makes sense. If a financial professional goes through the process and starts to have a consistent approach and commits and say does this for a certain period of time and invests the time and the money and the sweat, blood, and tears, if you will, how do they go about measuring the success of this endeavor, assuming that they can't point to 10 new clients that came to them saying, hey, I'm here with my $5 million because of that amazing video that I saw, right? Assuming
right.
that doesn't happen, how do they track the input to sort of, the growth of their practice?
This is the ROI conversation, right? That's it. We're talking about like, okay, I'm committed to this. I'm doing it. What's the ROI going to be? And and I give a lot of presentations, and so I pull lots of little tidbits from those. And there was one a couple months ago, an advisor raised their hand. I was talking to them about similar topic, video content, and he said, "So how many videos until I can bring in a new client?" I was like, "Dude, I have no idea. Like, I mean, I can't tell you. Like,
Four.
he's
I
like,
would have
well,
said four.
7.27.
yeah, he's like, oh, five videos, maybe? No. Six video, you get a client. And the audience kind of laughed a little bit, and they, but what that advisor is asking is the ROI. That's what they're asking. So
Right.
there's a couple ways to go about this. First off, when you first launch something like this, I tell all of our clients to look for clues. So first phase of, I think, the ROI conversation to me is, what's going to happen? You start creating videos, start creating podcasts. You're going to have friends and family are going to make comments to you. They're going to say, "Hey, by the way, I saw your video on this. Thought it was interesting." You're outside getting your mail, and your neighbor says, "Hey, I actually listened to your podcast. That's pretty cool." That's a clue that you're getting some traction. You're building a little bit of audience. Second phase up, clients start bringing it up. So if I'm distributing this stuff, right, regularly, I should hear anecdotally from clients. I'm going to start, "Hey, by the way, I watched your video on this. I saw that." If you're not getting that, we're missing something. Something's not right? It's not, the distribution isn't there. The content's not right. Something's wrong. That's like the next kind of level up. Third would be metrics are increasing. So views, impressions, follower count, like those things should, if I'm measuring those, and those are hard numbers, right? But I should notice that's it's trickling up. Do not expect a hockey stick of like, "Oh, wow, I'm going viral with this." Oh my gosh, that's like the worst conversation ever to have with someone. It's like, how do I go viral? But I should see
You don't
a
want to go
trend,
viral.
right? I
No.
should see a trend going up, right? And then what you'll get eventually, and this is the mecca, is you start meeting with prospects, and they say, "I've actually watched a bunch of your videos. I've actually listened to your podcast. I've been listening for a while now." And that should be all the affirmation that you need when someone's sitting in front of you, that you're getting the ROI on this. It changed, but you see how there's baby steps there? Like and I'm telling you, once the advisor knows that they should be looking for those things, they start realizing it. They're, at Thanksgiving dinner, and their uncle's like, "By the way, nice video on this." And they're like, "Oh, cool." They're watching it. And then it just progresses from there. The other thing I would say is start asking everyone how they heard about you. Everyone.
Mhm.
I mean, even clients. I think this is a good exercise. If you knew that number, would it shape your marketing going forward? Yeah, absolutely. It would shape so much of it if I had an accurate representation of how all my existing clients heard about me, and also new prospective clients, or even centers of influence that I'm trying to build relationships with. How did you hear about me? And eventually, you should get to a point where they say, "Actually, I watched your video first. I saw a video. I listened to an episode of your podcast, and then I kind of got hooked on that level of content." And that's where you want to get to that point.
Well, Kevin, we can't thank you enough for joining us today on the Human Centric Investing Podcast and sharing your thoughts and insights. And for our listeners, if you're interested in engaging with Kevin and his team, please visit their website at oxley.com for individual coaching and engagement. Thanks again, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for listening to the Hartford Funds Human Centric Investing Podcast. If you'd like to tune in for more episodes, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube.
And if you'd like to be a guest and share your best ideas for transforming client relationships, email us at guestbooking@hartfordfunds.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Talk to you soon.
The views and opinions expressed herein are those of the guest, who is not affiliated with Hartford Funds. Financial professionals should always consult their compliance department and individual firm policies before accessing any social media or using online communication tools for a business purpose.